Hi guys, and welcome back to Redcoat History. Today is the latest instalment of my interview with the brilliant Amarpal Singh. This is part 2 of a 4-part season I'm making for YouTube on the first Anglo-Sikh War. In part 1 we examined the rise of Ranjit Singh, the Lion of the Punjab. And today we look at the reasons that Britain and the Sikh Empire went to war. If you love military history, then please subscribe and share this video with friends, as that will really help the channel to grow and allow me to keep sharing these stories which I think are so important.
Ranjit Singh died in 1839, and from 1839 to 1845 you had that short sort of 6-year period during which, you know, all this sort of anarchical period had sort of developed. After he died, his son took over, but his son wasn't really of that same caliber at all.
As is so often the case in history, the sons of great men can rarely live up to their fathers.
That's right, yeah. In fact, he was, a lot of people say that he was sort of mentally deficient, if you like, you know. But his son, in other words, Ranjit's grandson, was in the same mold as Ranjit Singh. And, you know, he had that sort of military instinct, you know, the powers to organize the state. And so, you know, even though his son wasn't really in it, the grandson was almost sort of the king, if you like, you know, at that time. Unfortunately, he died. You know, it was either an accident or, you know, a lot of people suspect somebody just bumped him off. And the reason that they may have bumped him off was, you know, the fact that Ranjit Singh had other sons as well. And so obviously they were sort of interested in, you know, in the throne themselves. So there could have been this sort of, you know, this thing going on. But
so it was real Game of Thrones stuff after Ranjit's death, was it? Like a lot of people vying for power?
That's right. Yes, there was. One of his weaknesses, if you like, Ranjit Singh's weaknesses, was that he was a great military guy, but he less so on the administrative side, you know. So as soon as he died, there just wasn't that glue, you know. I don't think the empire had the time to sort of settle down and become established, if you like. You know, you always get this period where you know, sort of great men disappear, you know, Alexander the Great or something, you know. And after they go, nobody can fill their shoes and the whole thing just crumbles into pieces. And that's the case with the Sikh Empire as well. So his grandson died, Naunihal Singh. Another son called Sher Singh, he didn't have the talent as well. And he was a bit of a guy who just wants to, you know, have a good time, you know, and he sort of let things go effectively. And very quickly, the Sikh army began to, you know, effectively become the power in the country. And they start giving out the orders effectively. They had what was called committees, called panchayats. And these were committees made up of, you know, ordinary soldiers who just wouldn't do, you know, what their officers were telling them, you know, their commanders. And very quickly, you know, all the discipline was, you know, that Ranjit Singh had sort of fused into the army was sort of gradually seeping away. So, you know, the army effectively became, you know, the sort of Praetorian Guard, if you like. I don't know if, you know, you're into Roman history, but, you know, they had the emperor's bodyguard who was, you know, these bodyguards were effectively, you know, unseating and seating other people on the throne. So that's what it became like in the Punjab as well. So the main danger for the state came from the army rather than from the British, if you like, at that period. You had the British across the border who were obviously watching this. You know, they were watching this sort of descent into anarchy, if you like. And so the British were watching, you know, across the Satluj River, which was the border between the two states. And, you know, obviously they thought, you know, we've got a chance here. They were never really that interested in taking the Punjab in early years, simply because, you know, Ranjit Singh was, you know, such a good friend. And also, you know, because the Sikh army was so strong, you know, it just wasn't worth taking the risk, you know. The other reason was that, you know, Ranjit Singh was effectively, you know, guarding the entire border with Afghanistan.
Yeah, it was a classic buffer state, wasn't it, between the British and the Afghans, at least to keep the Afghans at bay.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. I mean, all the governor generals knew that they would have to put substantial forces. By this time, the British had taken Sindh province as well. So if they took over the Punjab, they would have to man, all the frontier, right from Kashmir, north of Kashmir, right up to Sindh province. And that would be heavily draining, financially. There wasn't really any great desire to, try their luck and, invading Punjab. But that changed when, after Ranjit Singh died, you had this anarchy going on. And in fact, you had a lot of these characters at Lahore, which is the capital of the Sikh Empire, actually approaching the British, asking them, if I give you some, so much cash, so much of this, so much of that, can you help me, on the throne? So, the cracks were already there, and they were already sort of developing this this idea of actually stepping in, even at that point.
And then how did that then develop to full-blown war? What was the sort of catalyst? We've got this sort of craziness happening inside the court in Lahore. How did that then overflow out and cause full-scale war?
Okay, well, you had two chaps coming into power in Lahore. One was Lal Singh. He was the prime minister of the state. And there was another guy called Tej Singh, who was the commander of the Sikh army. And both these guys decided that there's no real way to actually bring the empire back to, sort of an even keel, if you like. The things had gone beyond that. These army committees weren't sort of listening. Anyone who tried to, cut their salary or, sort things out was, effectively gotten rid of.
So basically the Khalsa was a big union.
Well, yes, it was. Yeah, yeah. I mean, these committees, they call it a Republican army, and that's what it was. The committees used to listen to the grassroots soldiers and, form their policy from there. So, the officers and the commanders, the generals didn't have anything, didn't have any control anymore.
So that was the reason then that Tej Singh and Lal Singh were, that was one of the reasons they kind of wanted to weaken the Khalsa, which is why they were kind of keen for the British to come in and do the job for them. Would that be a fair assessment?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah. I mean, basically, their idea was to pitch the Sikh army against the British. Now, if the Sikh army won, that's all good as well. They get the glory of, destroying the East India Company's hold on the country. So that was good as well. But if the Sikh army lost, again, that's good as well, because it cuts the Sikh army power right away. And what they were hoping for was that the company would actually take over the Punjab. They'll keep their jobs. They effectively become, almost a client state of the company. And but the Sikh army has been destroyed. So they thought of it as a win-win situation.
And then what was that final catalyst then that triggered the British to how did, because it was actually the Sikhs who crossed the Sutlej first, wasn't it? I'm a little bit hazy on the details. I've just read your book, but I can't remember exactly how the war kind of got going. Can you just give us that sort of overview of how it finally came to a head?
Yes, it was actually the British that sort of did a few aggressive moves, if you like, to sort of trigger things off. The British agent in Firozpur, which is the advanced British base, it's very close to the Punjab in the north there. He decided to annex some of the Sikh territory south of the river, which belonged to Lahore.
That's not like the British to do that.
Well, I think it was part of this move to sort of trigger a war, actually. And there was a few other moves as well. This idea of attacking the Punjab had sort of developed quite fully by this stage. And the Governor General actually ordered some boats from Bombay right up to, the Sutlej River, and these boats were sort of armored boats, which to form a bridge effectively. So whenever they wanted to attack the Punjab, they had that bridge there ready so that the army could pass over. And there was a couple of other quite aggressive things that were done by this agent who was called Broadfoot. He's quite sort of infamous in sort of Anglo-Sikh history. He fired on a few sort of Sikh parties that were crossing over to sort of manage Sikh affairs there as well. So that all led to that became an excuse, if you like, for Lal Singh and Tej Singh to say, look, we've got to do something about this, and let's just push the Sikh army over the border.
And in the next episode, we'll be picking up what happened when the Sikh army crossed the border. Would they force the British from India? Or would they be destroyed by the all-conquering army of the Raj? You might be surprised by what happened.